mentioned painting in my Regency Era starter pack video, and that is an activity I have been doing quite a bit of this month as I work on illustrations for my upcoming illustrated kitten storybook. You may recall back in September, I published the Book of Cymbeline, A Kitten's Tale from Summer to Fall. It's a children's book available on Amazon as both an ebook and a paperback. I wrote and illustrated it myself. It's about my kitten, Cymbeline. I knew nothing about cats until this tiny apex predator showed up unexpectedly in the tree hollow right outside of my farmhouse. And it was so much a storybook scenario that I thought I had to make it into a storybook. And it was really fun to write the first Book of Cymbeline, which was all about her arrival. And then the second Book of Cymbeline is going to pick up where that left off. The tale follows the seasons, so from fall to winter, through Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all the way to when the snowdrops are coming up, just as they are around now. I'm finishing up the illustrations, but I do have the copy manuscript finished. It's about 10,000 words. My mom's already read it, and she said she liked it even better than the first, which was wonderful to hear. It was really fun to develop Cymbeline's voice and try to see the world through the eyes of a growing, energetic, charismatic kitten. If you're looking for something to read for middle grade March, this could be a great pick. It is a children's book, but I wrote it for all ages, especially cat lovers, obviously. If you have not yet checked out the first Book of Cymbeline, that is out now. It's linked down in the description below. I'm aiming at February 24th to get this second installment out, so stay tuned for the link for that. It's been fun to channel Eleanor Dashwood and Emma Woodhouse with my painting, but I have made time for reading this month as well. I've been busy this week working on the second Book of Cymbeline, but I have had time for some Febregency reading, and I thought I would sit down and quickly tell you about it. This week has been mostly poetry. I didn't plan to divide up the weeks by the challenges, but somehow that's kind of what's happened. The first week I was reading Evelina and the Absentee by Frances Burney and Mariah Edgeworth, two authors Jane Austen loved and referenced, and I enjoyed both of those so much. And then this week I have been reading Sir Walter Scott's The Lady of the Lake. Also, I've been dipping into Thomas More's collected poetry and my volumes of William Cowper. So, first of all, Sir Walter Scott, The Lady of the Lake. I've been listening to that on LibriVox. There's quite a good recording of it, and it's totally free. That's one of the great things about these Regency, authors and authors from the past, is that it's not too difficult to find a free copy on Gutenberg or a free audiobook on LibriVox or on YouTube. But it's been really fun to listen to. I'm in about Canto 4. I love discovering lines from Jane Austen that I'm familiar with. In Persuasion, Anne Elliot and Captain Benwick mention Walter Scott and The Lady of the Lake. And in one of the Persuasion adaptations, Benwick actually quotes a line from it about the foam on the mountain, the bubble on the fountain. Hold on, let me find it. Like the dew on the mountain, like the foam on the river, like the bubble on the fountain, thou art gone and forever. So it was very exciting to come across that line in The Lady of the Lake. It's actually in kind of a shorter funeral poem. In The Lady of the Lake, there are often songs or shorter poems that the characters sing and the characters interject, which are really neat. But it's so cool to see them in their context, because in the context of the story of The Lady of the Lake, lake. There is a funeral happening. An old man has just passed away, and his young sons and his wife are there grieving for him, when all of a sudden into this funeral comes this signal calling for war, calling all the troops to come to the chieftain and meet at the mustering place. And it's very dramatic. And then this poor young man who's, you know, just inherited the title from his father, he gallops off to give the signal to like the next clan, and that clan, the young man has just gotten married, and so he like literally has to leave the church and leave his new wife and go to the mustering spot. It is quite a romantic, thrilling, adventurous tale. It actually does not have anything to do with Arthur, so it's not the Excalibur Lady of the Lake, and it's not the Lady of Shalott by Tennyson, although Tennyson would have been influenced by Sir Walter Scott. And actually the word Shalott, I think, means boat, and it is in The Lady of the Lake by Sir Walter Scott. But this is a epic Scottish poem about the figure Ellen Douglas. It's set at the time of King James I, so the Highland clans and the Lowland Scots are really warring and feuding, and you have Highland chieftains who are going and doing these terrible raids into the lowlands, and you have Highland chieftains who are kind of in hiding, one of them on this lonely isle in the middle of a lake. So that's where we get the Lady of the Lake, Ellen. That's where we meet her. Apparently this poem was just a smash hit when it came out. It was just so popular. Reading it makes me think about how beautifully the Regency authors and writers use words to paint pictures. I mean, these days, you know, you set up a camera and you can show exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to talk about it at all. But it's so powerful to see how Sir Walter Scott just describes every different aspect of the scene and really takes you there, and gives you the feeling of what it would be like to be in the Highlands, to find this lonely island on the beautiful lake. Apparently he was traveling to this exact, he names the mountains and the lakes, Loch Katrine, I think, and I think he did travel there himself, and so he was describing what he had seen. The poem opens with a hunt, and there is a lowland huntsman who I believe is with the king, King James, and he is just going after this stag, and it's so beautifully told, but you feel so bad for the stag because it's obviously this magnificent stag, and so you're kind of cheering for him to escape the hunter, and he actually does. The hunter kind of gets lost up in the Highlands trying to track down this stag. And it ended up being, and I don't really think this is much of a spoiler, but if you're really concerned about spoilers, this is your warning. But later in the poem, that first scene proves such a great foil because that lowland warrior hunter who is tracing the stag is himself hunted by the Highlanders, and so the juxtaposition is really, really powerful. I don't have any lines of it flagged because I've been listening to it instead of reading it, but I'll have to go and pick out some of the beautiful descriptions and maybe put them in a blog post on my blog, bookishprincess.substack.com. I'm planning on doing a little mid-Feb Regency check-in, but I do have some lines picked out of my other two poetical works, which I've been reading. So I've been visiting Ireland again. The Absentee by Mariah Edgeworth is set in Ireland and delves into Irish history. I talked a lot about that in my review in last week's video. And Thomas More was regarded as the national poet. He lived in the Regency period. He was friends with Lord Byron, and he wrote, as you can see, just tons and tons of poems on many different topics, but I've been enjoying looking at the Irish melodies. Many of them are very melancholy and have this sense of a loss of freedom because, of course, the British came and conquered Ireland. But I also really enjoy like the little bits and pieces of Irish folklore and Irish myth and legend. This is the Song of Inishfell. They came from a land beyond the sea, and now o'er the western main set sail in their good ships gallantly from the sunny land of Spain. Oh, where is the isle we've seen in dreams, our destined home or grave? Thus sung they as, by the morning's beams, they swept the Atlantic wave. And lo, where afar o'er ocean shines a sparkle of radiant green, as though in that deep lay emerald mines, whose light through the wave was seen. It is Inishfell, 'tis Inishfell, rings o'er the echoing sea, while bending to heaven the warriors hail that home of the brave and free. Then turned they unto the eastern wave, where now their day god's eye a look of such sunny omen gave, as lighted up sea and sky. Nor frown was seen through sky or sea, nor tear or leaf or sod, when first on their isle of destiny our great forefathers trod. I thought that was so neat. I was researching this some more, and it is drawing on an ancient medieval legend that there were these Milesian people from Spain who came and, were the ancestors of the Celts, were the first to settle Ireland. I don't think I had heard that exact legend before, although I knew that there's a Spanish connection to Ireland. So when you think of like Irish coloring or what an Irish person looks like, of course the red hair and the blue eyes are really famous. But my coloring, my hair color and eye color do come from my Irish ancestors. And they often call that Black Irish. And the lore that I had heard is that it came from Spanish ancestors who were wrecked on the coast of Ireland. Like a ship from the Spanish Armada was blown off course, and maybe the soldiers who were shipwrecked got just integrated into the community, and maybe one of them gave me my dark hair and dark eyes. My family loves this show called Time Team, which is a show about British archaeology. They're these archaeologists who just go around the British Isles and are investigating old sites, and in one recent episode they were investigating a Spanish galleon shipwrecked off the coast of Scotland, actually, not Ireland. But anyway, it was fun to see that the Spanish connection goes back further than I thought. So now you know, red is not the only Irish hair color. Brown is also Irish. I'm sure I'll dive into this some more. There are really just so many different types of poems and poetry in here. And then I have been reading from my lovely little volumes of Cowper in Evelina by Fanny Burney that I was reading. Evelina grew up in retirement, is the word that is often used, which basically just means, she was in a little village, not in a big town. She didn't mix in high society. She didn't go to a lot of balls or meet with a whole lot of families. She just kind of lived with her own family in retirement. And there was a poem in here called Retirement that I thought it'd be fun to read, because we don't typically use that word in the same context at all anymore. But here from Cowper is the Regency Era idea of retirement. Hackneyed in business, wearied at that oar which thousands once fast chained to quit no more, but which, when life at ebb runs weak and low, all wish, or seem to wish, they could forego. The statesman, lawyer, merchant, man of trade, pants for the refuge of some rural shade, where all his long anxieties forgot amid the charms of a sequestered spot, or recollected only to gild o'er, and add a smile to what was sweet before. He may possess the joys he thinks he sees, lay his old age upon the lap of ease, improve the remnant his wasted span, and having lived a trifler, die a man. Thus conscience pleads her cause within the breast, though long rebelled against, not yet suppressed, and calls a creature formed for God alone, for heaven's high purposes and not his own, calls him away from selfish ends and aims, from what debilitates and what inflames, from cities humming with a restless crowd, sordid as active, ignorant as loud, whose highest praise is that they live in vain, the dupes of pleasure or the slaves of gain, where works of man are clustered close around and works of God are hardly to be found. To regions where, in spite of sin and woe, traces of Eden are still seen below, where mountain, river, forest, field, and grove remind him of his Maker's power and love. 'Tis well if, looked for at so late a day, in the last scene of such a senseless play, true wisdom will attend his feeble call, and grace his action ere the curtain fall. So the scenario here is, of course, an elderly worker who's been at work in society, in the city, all these years, is at last thinking, you know what, I should get out of this rat race and, find myself a place in the country. And I love how he ties God in, this idea that being out in the country, you are surrounded by God's work, able to focus on God more, although the poem does go on and it looks at the benefits and the challenges of retirement. I just think Cowper is such a beautiful writer, and I love how faith is such an important part of his works. He wrote many hymns, which I know Tiffany from A Beautiful Minutia was mentioning she's going to listen to some of Cowper's hymns, so I think I'm going to have to do that too. And Thomas Moore, of course, this is Irish Melodies, many of his poetry In fact, I think that Inishfell has been adapted into song, so I need to look that up as well. Reading Cowper made me think of what we were talking about during our Febregency reading sprints. It was so much fun to join the other hosts for some reading sprints over on Jennifer Brooks's channel. Tristan mentioned that one thing that you often see in the Regency era is that, you know, faith, the Christian faith of these writers was so important to them, and it's important to their characters, and it's very present in the works. And the modern audience of today, you know, a lot of people unfortunately don't have faith, don't have a religious background. And so that element, that aspect of these works, you might not understand if you're not coming from that background yourself. And yet, it shouldn't be just written off. Our society these days too often likes to just sort of push the religious aspect of the past aside, especially when you're reading. It's like they just want to ignore the fact that Jane Austen was a Christian, or this author was a Christian. They just sort of brush that under the rug. And I just think that's such a big mistake, because we ought to take these writers at their word. I mean, sure, there are hypocrites in every day and age, but I know I'm a person of faith, and I would say my faith is not incidental or accidental. It is essential. It is foundational. So I don't think we do these authors justice when we don't take them at their word, when we just ignore that part of their lives. And maybe by listening carefully and trying to understand their perspective, we'll find that that same faith is still calling to us. I know that's one thing I love so much about the classics, is I feel that they are so enduring, that, you know, there are certain things that you learn about that were different in the past, some bad, some good, but then there are also so many just human things that don't change. So yes, there's my quick little poetry review for my Febregency poetry week. I'd love to hear about what you guys are reading this month down in the comments below. I hope your reading month is going really well, and I'll talk to you again soon. Stay bookish, guys. Bye.